So what I'm about to talk to you about is probably one of the hardest days of my career. This only happened a couple of weeks back. For the viewers out there that are watching this, I need to kind of preface this and have a spoiler. In this story, we meet somebody who has met the end of their lives. And the reason why I'm going to tell you this story is because, unfortunately, it's not uncommon for service plumbers to have this experience. If that's not your cup of tea, if this conversation will make you uncomfortable, by all means, just go to the next video. I'll be uploading something in a few days, so just skip this one over because it's not an easy conversation. It deals with a lot of really strong emotions like grief and mourning, and it also deals with, somebody that's deceased in the unit. For those of you that are willing to take on this journey with me and listen to what had happened, here it goes. So, I decided to vlog this day. I didn't know this event was going to take place, so I started my vlog like you start every single vlog. Got my cameras ready. I started thinking about the shots that I wanted to take. I also thought about what sort of theme I wanted this vlog to be about, and got to the first job site, and I took out all my tools and I got everything ready and I started the first job, when lo and behold, I get a phone call from my father. My father is on a separate side of town and he's not really close to where I am, and he essentially says to me, look, there's a leak in a building that we service quite a bit and it's just down the road. It's not even a 5-minute drive away. You need to drop everything and go there. So that's what I essentially did. I dropped everything and I drove to the building that I was supposed to take a look at this leak for. I get to the building, and as I get there, I call the superintendent. So we go up to the unit that's experiencing the leak. We knock on the door, we're let in, and the person that lives in this unit essentially says to me, if you go into the washroom and you put your ear up against the wall, which is right next to their bathtub, you're gonna hear a lot of water coming down. And to be honest, there was so much water discharging that in my mind, I was like, I don't even need to put my ear up to the wall. That's a lot of water. It sounds like there's a fixture upstairs fully discharging. That's what it sounds like. But at the same time, it doesn't sound like there's a leak. It just sounds like water's discharging through a stack. You know what I mean? So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking to myself, if there's an actual leak and this much water is discharging, we would have seen a tremendous amount of water. The water's going at full tilt, in other words. So right away, I started understanding, okay, so what they mean by leak in this situation is that it's discharging continuously. So I turned to the person that owns the unit. I said, how long has this been? Person goes 2 to 3 days. That's a significant amount of time. Now, what I want to do is dive into my mind for a second as a plumber, as a troubleshooter, and tell you what I'm thinking. I'm going to show you and jump to another video right now. And what I'm showing you here essentially is a faucet whose cartridge is broken. In this video, you're going to see right here, you have a cartridge that's broken in the on position. So I'm trying to turn this cartridge off and it's not turning off at all. When I'm in this unit and I'm told about this and I'm hearing all this water, this is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking to myself, okay, there's a cartridge upstairs and it's broken. It's discharging continuously. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. Let's go take a look, sort of thing. We go upstairs, and as we're going upstairs, we get a phone call. And the phone call we get is from one of the family members of the people that live in this unit. And this family member essentially saying, look, I'm trying to get into that unit. And we're standing there going, wow, like we're trying to get into it as well. The superintendent goes, okay, good. I'm glad you're here because we were about to access the unit. We think there's a big leak happening. I'll go down and get the key. So the superintendent tells me to wait by the door. And as I'm waiting, that family member that called shows up. They approach me. They ask me what's going on. I let them know, look, we're waiting for the super to go get the key for this extra lock. We think we have it. And then I notice very quickly that the person I'm speaking to is trembling a little bit. They're holding a very large coffee, right? And I'm thinking to myself, maybe it's this coffee that's, some people get amped up on coffee and they have the jitters. So they start telling me the story how basically one of the individuals that live here has been living with this person for a couple of days, basically helping them out around their own house, sort of thing. So in my mind, that kind of fulfills what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, okay, somebody left the unit and upon leaving, the cartridge might have broken or something like that, and it's discharging at full tilt. That makes sense to me. All of a sudden I see them shaking again, and like it's a significant shake, like they're trying to touch their face, but they're like firing at all cylinders, you know? So I had to kind of stop and actually address it. I go, are you okay? And they go, no. I go, what's wrong? They go, well, my other family member, we haven't been able to get a hold of them. This is where they live. Like, in other words, the person I'm speaking to thinks the other family member's in the place. And at that point, I kind of had to test my theory with what's happening there. So the conversation I start having is, okay, have you tried calling this person? Yes, of course. What happens? The phone doesn't work. Oh, okay. When's the last time you spoke to this person? 2 to 3 days ago. Oh. Well, we just found out from the previous unit that we went to that was complaining about the water discharging, that it's been discharging for 2 to 3 days. So it's at this point that I start thinking to myself, this might be entirely different than what I thought this was going to be. And the person I'm speaking to, that's the family member, they actually might be correct. So I'm seeing them fire at all cylinders, like they're still shaking. And I essentially say, you know what? Why don't we have a seat? Because they're already at such an elevated state. Panic is not very far away from where this person is. They sit down with me and we start talking, and I'm just trying to get information out of them so that I can occupy their mind. Because the last thing we want is for them to start getting more and more fearful as this is going on, and the hyperventilation to continue on. Like, we want to avoid somebody passing out, you know what I'm saying? And if they do pass out, the best place to be is sitting down. It's not a very big fall, you know? So they're sitting down, they're telling me the story and this and that, and I find out that this person works in the medical field. So upon hearing this information, you know, I have my first aid, but it's not something I practice every day. Upon hearing that they do work in the medical field, I say to them, look, you know first aid? They say, yeah. I also took down their name. I go, what's your name? That way, if I need to specifically address them, I can address them. And then I essentially said to this person, look, it's probably best that you don't access the unit. Probably best that I access it without you there. And me and the super obviously access it without you there. And this person neither acknowledged or disagreed with the information. They just kind of, you know what I mean? It just kind of went to them and it settled in them. And now this person's getting phone calls by other family members that are fully panicking over the phone. And this person's doing their best to calm the other individuals down when they themselves are also panicking, which was very noble of them. I mean, they were really trying to hold it together, and I thought they were doing a great job for what it was, you know? So the superintendent comes up to speed up the conversation. The first key doesn't work. And we realize that we don't have the key, we have to break the lock. The superintendent comes back with a drill. We got to break this lock. And as the superintendent approaches this individual, the super is starting to piece it together. So the super turns to this individual and says, when's the last time you spoke to them? And the person goes, a few days ago, 2 to 3 days ago. And you can see visibly on the super's face that he pieced it together right there. Right then and there, you can tell, oh, 2 to 3 days ago, we got a complaint about this leak. This person hasn't been spoken to for 2 to 3 days. Oh, you know what I mean? The super did a really good job at keeping it under wraps. So we're fumbling with the lock, trying to get it open. Finally, the super rotates the lock correctly and the door creeps open ever so slightly. And I remember there being a very stiff, thick moment of silence between him and I. This was very short, like it was maybe a second, but it was so obvious that the super and I were thinking the same thing, which was, oh no, the door is wide open now. By the way, I should preface that we've knocked on the door a few times at this point, right? We're trying to get a hold of anybody that might be inside. So the door is open, and I have to turn to the family member and let them know we're going in, stay right here sort of thing. But they're on a FaceTime call with somebody else, and they are not in good shape, as anybody would be. So the door creeps open. We open up, and I do what I do normally as a service plumber. I walk into a unit, or I knock on a unit, and I go, hello, plumber, hello, just to make sure that if somebody's home, they know I'm entering. I'm not entering unannounced, sort of thing. As we walk in, the super kind of grabs hold of me and says, listen, you have to be careful. I think we have a deceased person in this unit. I say, I know. Thank you, I know. As we're approaching the washroom, the bathtub is going full tilt. So it was what we suspected. It was the bathtub upstairs. The curtain's drawn. So I approached the curtain. I go, hello, on the way in. And I try to grab the curtain, and the curtain's got some weight to it. So something's stopping it. And I look in, and it's what we are all worried about. It's what we suspected. I see the family member in the bathtub. So I turned the super. I let them know that the person's deceased. The super comes in to verify it. I should say that the state of the body automatically let me know that the person was deceased. There was no question about it. There were things that I saw that made me go, okay, this has been the case for a long time. It's not just within the last couple of hours sort of thing. I have to shut the water. So the super is out of the unit now, and I'm treading behind him, following behind, and the family member has climbed the wall because, again, they are shaking very rapidly. They're walking up to the super and they're going, what's happening? Is my family member in there sort of thing? And the superintendent is trying to explain it. I basically said, listen, we have to sit down because I know it's about to escalate. Most likely this person is already very stressed out. The stress is just going to get worse. You know what I mean? Like, that's the obvious projection of this. So I say, we have to sit down. They say, is my family member in there? I say, yes. And I say, they are perished. That's how I explained it. I said they're perished. And this family member starts pushing me out of the way to try to go. And I'm saying, look, that's not in your best interest. And they're saying, I have to make sure that if they need my help, I can help them. I say, you need to trust me. They're perished. They've passed on. And I think that's when it settled in for them. It's a very hard story. Sorry, guys. I'm getting a bit emotional. Upon hearing that news, they started doing what we all would do. They started crying quite heavily. So I brought them to the ground and I laid this person down. They're in no state to be standing, you know what I'm saying? And even sitting, I don't know if they could sit at this moment. But they're still on the phone with somebody. So I have to have that awkward situation of picking up the phone and saying, and I'm wearing a mask, by the way, but I still have to say to this person, listen, you know where we're at, right? I need you to make arrangements to get here or something like that. I have to get off the phone and calm this person down. I get off the phone. My biggest fear, again, is having this person pass out. When stress is really high and they're not monitoring their breathing, there's a high chance of somebody passing out in this situation. That's the fear for me. I don't know if that's true, but that's the fear for me. So that's what I went into. What's really interesting, I sort of showed up to the job site being a plumber and troubleshooting for plumbing to eventually realize that I'm sort of gone into a first aid kind of mentality of, we just need this person in good enough shape for the professionals to show up so that they can sort of take over, you know what I mean? So they're going through the motions of coping with the current news that they just had, which is going in between, you know, crying and not crying, full lucidity and conversations out loud with themselves about what's happening, to again crying. And then there came a moment where they sort of went catatonic, where it became super rigid. They stopped moving altogether. The legs stopped shaking. It was shaking for a long duration of time. And that's when I sort of had to kick into gear and say, listen, and I knew their name at this point. I said, listen, let's add some deep breaths into this, okay? I'm gonna count it out. In, 2, 3, out. 2, 3, in, 2, 3, because their breath became so shallow in that moment of rigidity that I again was like, okay, they're not doing well. Let's just get their breathing on track. Everything else is totally fine. Like, we need to cry it out. Absolutely. That's part of the formula for coping for a lot of people, including myself, right? At this point, one of their family members that they were helping to cope calls on this person's phone, and this person's in no state to pick up the phone. And I let them know, listen, this person's calling. You know, the call display tells us who it is. What do you want me to do? You want me to let it to run to voicemail? They say yes. It ran to voicemail, and then afterwards, upon it running to voicemail, I said to this person laying down, I go, do you think this person's going to panic that you're not picking up the phone? They said yes. I go, okay. So if they call again, I'm picking up the phone. Basically take charge of that. And at this point, the superintendent's doing a great job of calling the appropriate people. First person he calls is the property manager that's currently in charge there and says, listen, we got a situation. I need you to call the police. Call the police, get an ambulance here, get the fire department. That they all come at the same time. At this point, the family member calls back again. I pick it up. I say, look, this is Kenny the plumber. Where are you? Okay, you're nearby. What I need you to do is as soon as you get here, you need to call us. We're going to come down. We're going to come get you, sort of thing. And I was doing my best to not answer any questions over the phone. This person was driving, and the last thing I want to do is make them hysterical while driving or panic while driving. I need to basically tell them, look, here's the protocol. This is what you're gonna do. Come and do that. And if they were gonna ask any questions, I was basically gonna say, we'll explain it all as soon as you get here. They were really good about it. They're like, okay, I'll be there in a few, sort of thing. See you soon. We go back to watching the person who's currently on the floor. Paramedic, the fire department shows up first. The fire department takes a blood pressure test of this person. Their blood pressure's in good shape. Not too long after that, the paramedic shows up. Paramedic is starting to work on this person that I'm sitting with right there. You know, and they're doing their best, and now they have to ask a million questions to this person who's under stress, and they're trying to piece everything together for their family member that is in the washroom, you know what I'm saying? Which is really hard on the person that's being asked all the questions, because they're coping with the situation overall. So kudos to them, man. They did the best job that they could, and I thought they did a good job. The other family members show up, and we have to deal with them coming to terms with the news, which is just as hard. But the situation eventually starts diffusing, thankfully, because everybody's coming to terms with it, and also everybody is putting the engine into gear. You know what I'm saying? At first, when the news is administered, you don't know what to do. Afterwards, once your initial grief gets sorted out, then it's sort of like, okay, it's game time. What's the next plan? Because what they realize is, which is so beautiful, I might add, what they realize is they're actually in charge of this situation. There's a lot of people depending on them, on these two people. It's always amazing to watch somebody step up. Do you know what I mean? To see a hard situation and to see somebody harden themselves to get through it. I always find that amazing. And that's what they did. You know, when they say the going gets tough, the tough get going, that's what happened. Yeah, the grief had to take place. You have to cope with it. But at the same time, there came a point where they eventually, both family members said, you know what? We got to do this. Everybody's depending on us. Even the person who unfortunately passed away, they're depending on us. The next few days are on these family members. And they mustered up the courage, they dug deep, and they started basically orchestrating the next few days, making sure that everything that needs to happen is going to happen. They were awesome. You know, like, as hard as the situation was, they did a fantastic job. I'm super impressed by them. I'm proud of them. You know, I don't even know them, but me watching the progression of emotion, wow, good for you. Like, good for you. You picked yourself up quick. I'm sure the next few days were tough, and I'm sure you had other moments where the panic went up and the stress and the crying, and that's all part of it, man. But you guys did amazing. Amazing. So once the paramedic and the fire department and also the police showed up, the situation was diffused. We went into another place of this building to kind of sit down and just keep diffusing. I had to talk to the police because I was one of the people that found the person in the unit, and they took my information and I was good to go. And upon leaving, I went over to the two family members. I said, hey, you guys take care of yourselves, you know what I'm saying? So look, it was a really tough situation. The entire time that I was there, I wasn't emotional. I was more in adrenaline, you know what I mean? Upon speaking to the superintendent about a week or two later, they were asking me how I was doing about the situation, and, you know, I said, I had some tough moments, I ain't gonna lie. And they said, look, it did not look like you were stressed or anything like that. Like, when you were walking into the unit, it looked like you were ready to take on whatever problem was behind the door. And the truth is, I was sort of like a duck on water, you know. I look calm on the surface, but underneath the surface, my feet are kicking a mile a minute. That's because I was running on adrenaline. And as I was accessing the unit, I was more concerned for the family member outside than I was for myself, you know what I mean? Because if it is true what's going to happen, the person with the most trauma here is going to be the family member. So that's sort of how it manifested for me. But here's what I gotta tell you. Here's when it comes back to reality and about plumbing again. The truth is that after this was happening, this had happened, I had to go back to work. I had to go back to that first call that I was telling you all that I was on. That's sort of when the digestion period started taking place. Like, there was a lot of trauma. The first trauma is it's not every day you see a deceased person. Seeing that's very scary, and I have to be honest, although I don't think it was the worst kind of scene that it could have been, it was still scary. The other thing is, having to help somebody go through their emotional trauma is not an easy thing either, especially if you're affected emotionally yourself. So that was part of the trauma as well, you know what I mean? Having to watch somebody cope with this was really hard to watch. It's hard to watch people go through that, you know what I mean? So afterwards, when I got back to the other job site, I had a really hard time staying focused. That job took way longer than it should have, simply because of how far I was into my mind. You know, I had a really hard time staying organized and staying on the task, because as I'm doing the work, I'm actually replaying a lot of the situations that happened earlier that morning. And then when I'd go out to the truck to go get something, I'd come back just to realize that I forgot 3 or 4 things in the truck. Like, there were many things I had to go and grab. So I was all over the place that day after that had happened. I was trying to just come to terms with what an emotional roller coaster that was this morning. And then later that evening, when I got home and I told my wife the story, I didn't tell it to her until later. We have to go shower, and it was hard looking at the bathtub in my house for a few minutes. I mean, I pushed through. It wasn't anything debilitating, but there was a moment of like, oh man, you know, oh man, you know. And I think what's the most interesting is about 4 or 5 days later, I have to walk into a unit to turn on the water in the bathtub. And as I'm walking in, the curtain's drawn. And as I grab that curtain to open it, I had a flashback of that moment in the bathtub 4 days previous. And I remember that flashback of panic, of like, no, watch out, you know? And it was just so shocking because I wasn't thinking about it as I got to the bathtub, but as soon as I get there and I grab the curtain, it's like, it hit me like a ton of bricks, like, be careful. And that was something I've never experienced before either. So peeps, this is a super long video, but I wanted to tell you the story. It was a little bit therapeutic on my part, but I wanted to let you know what had happened, how I handled it. Upon speaking to a few of my friends who are social workers, now looking back upon it, if I could change something, I think we had enough evidence to call the police before entering the unit altogether. So that's something that you have to keep in mind. I don't think, if you've pieced it together and most likely there's somebody that's perished, I don't think you need to access the unit yourself. You can call the police and call the professionals to go and do that themselves. And when I was speaking to the superintendent a few days later, they said the same thing. Most likely, if you've pieced it together, it's okay to do that. Call the police immediately and say, look, there's a chance that we have somebody who's perished in this unit. That's something I would have changed. Everything else I think that happened was in a strange way having a lot of luck on our side. Because here's also what I couldn't help but feel. We got really lucky that the family member had called us right before we were about to access the unit. You know what I mean? Like, if we accessed that unit without a phone call, without warning, I would have ran in there, you know, looking for this cartridge, like trying to see if it's the cartridge. I would have never thought to myself that somebody was deceased in the unit. That's number one. Number two, the family member that couldn't get into the unit, if they had walked in on their own, oh my goodness, you know, like, can you imagine? Can you imagine how hard that would have been on them? So in a really strange way, I think we had luck on our side, you know. We had luck that, A, we were warned about what we might see. I could step in and go verify the fear for the family member. I'm happy I could do that. I don't want them doing that, you know. Like, we got lucky, man. We got lucky. We had a lot of luck on our side. And I don't know, you know. That's where I'm at with it. I was a mess the rest of the day. I had a hard time putting fixtures back together. I eventually did put the fixtures back together, and I remember at the end of the day really needing to talk about it. And I was telling my wife on the phone, look, I'm a bit of a wreck. I need to talk to you about this. When we get to the house, do you mind putting everything down and I need to get this out of me, sort of thing. And I got it out of me and I felt way better. And every single time I spoke about it after that, I felt better about it as well. And this right here is also very therapeutic therapeutic, so I really appreciate you all. The reason why I'm telling you this story is because if I know a bathtub is running, and it's been running for a few days, the very first thing that's going to pop into my mind now is this experience. It's something that I think is solidified, that these sorts of things happen. These are part of the variables that we have to deal with potentially on an everyday basis. Again, I don't want to concern you. For those of you that are thinking about getting into plumbing or service plumbing specifically, I don't want to concern you. This has never happened to my father, and there are a lot of plumbers that this has never happened to, but I have spoken to people on the channel that have said, yeah, look, I've had that happen once, maybe even twice, you know what I mean? So it's something to keep in mind. It's part of the variables. All you can do is your best. And if you piece it together that somebody might be in there, I don't think there's anything wrong with calling the police, especially after you bang on the door a couple of times and try to get somebody's attention and the water's been running for a few days. I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to call the police and saying, look, I think that we have somebody that's deceased in here. Can you send somebody to help us access the unit? I'm sorry about how sad this topic is. I'm sorry about it being more of a heavier video than usual. It is a day in the life of a plumber though. I think it fits what we need to talk about, and it fits the content. Here's what I want to say to you all. First of all, to that family, again, like I said, I'm proud of you guys. You did a great job. That's a really hard situation to cope with, and you guys did a great job coping. I'm sorry for your loss. You know, my condolences. I hope everything after that went smoothly. You two seemed like you were on top of it, so I'm sure that it went as smooth as it could. We have a very limited amount of time on this planet. Moments like this remind you of it, but for what it's worth, I appreciate all of your souls for being along this journey with me. Thank you for the support and the ongoing support. I love you guys, and I'll see you soon.
Oh, here you are, face to face in this trashy bar. Another glass and I am going places. Makes me laugh about the irony of everything. I like the way you're thinking. I don't really care about the music on